Should be good.
We're good? Okay. So thank you for joining us here today. We're glad that you're here in Maine and that we get to spend some time with you. I want to get right to some of the newer issues that have popped up in our area, starting with the Stacyville Fire Department. They experienced a catastrophic accidental fire a short time ago. And we know that recent federal funding has afforded other rural departments the opportunity to either renovate or build new facilities. So what help is available for Stacyville right now?
Well, first, let me say that my heart goes out to the firefighters and other staff at the fire department. I can't imagine how devastating it must have been to watch the fire. I have been successful in securing funding for fire departments, fire stations all over the state. Mm-hmm. That cycle has finished and we're in the midst of a new cycle. Mm-hmm. But we would be very happy to work with Stacyville to prepare what's called a congressionally directed spending request for next year. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the window is closed for this year, but we'll also explore whether there are any federal grant programs or any other way of getting them the assistance that I know they desperately need.
Have you had any contact with them thus far, or do they just need to reach out to your office?
We will be in touch with them. I had just learned about the fire just recently, and my staff will be reaching out to them.
Great. I want to shift focus. A lawsuit has come up recently, filed in Penobscot County Court, to do with social media. The lawsuit is from a patient of Northern Light Health alleging that the Metapixel and other digital trackers like it were implemented in a healthcare system's website and that they tracked patient activity and then transmitted it to Facebook and Google and potentially other third-party sites. Should these trackers be allowed to be used by healthcare systems in any capacity, considering, their capabilities, what they can be used for? Let's start with that part of the question.
Federal law, known as HIPAA, already protects personal medical information of patients. I was surprised to read about this lawsuit, and obviously I don't know about the merits. Northern Light has denied the allegations. Sure. It certainly is serious if personal medical information is shared with a commercial entity without the patient's permission, express permission, because that's what's required under current federal law. So I'll be watching this lawsuit very carefully. I'm beginning to think that perhaps we need a federal digital privacy law because the laws vary from state to state, other than this overreaching law called HIPAA that protects medical information. But the invasions of privacy go far beyond medical information. So I think maybe it's time for Congress to look at whether there should be a federal data privacy law. I'm not sure the implications of that, but that's what came to mind.
Could be worth exploring.
Absolutely.
This certainly isn't the first time that social media has come under fire recently, including Facebook and Meta. And so, in your view, do you feel like these technology and social media giants are being adequately regulated and are showing the proper accountability, or is there more work to do there?
There is more work to do. For example, I am a co-sponsor of a bipartisan bill that says that if you use a deep fake, in other words, if we took your image and put words in your mouth that you never said and put it on the internet, and it wasn't clearly satire, nor did the company have your permission, that you would have the right to stop that. I'm worried how that's going to be used in election campaigns where they could make a candidate appear to say something that the candidate did not, that was not obviously a funny satire.
Yeah, we already had that Joe Biden robocall that caused issues in New Hampshire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think you're going to see increasing problems because the technology is so advanced now that you simply cannot tell the difference.
I want to shift gears somewhat dramatically and talk for a little while about the Lewiston mass shooting. Just an absolute tragedy for our state, for our country, as are all of these types of events. You know, you personally are seeking to draft legislation that will require military services to report to authorities when service members pose a threat to themselves or others, or could. We know that that is one element of what happened in Lewiston. So, can you say a little bit more about how you're hoping that legislation might work?
I have been waiting for the Army Reserve and the Army Inspector General to complete their investigation. And just recently, I questioned the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Army and solicited their cooperation, not only for completing these studies, which are extensive. The Secretary of Navy told me, or the Secretary of the Army told me that they are 3,000 pages of interviews and other evidence, so I think they're going to be very comprehensive. But both the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Army have pledged to work with me on this legislation. What I want to do is, if any of our military services determines that a service member poses a threat to him or herself or to others, that we would have a referral under a state's crisis intervention law, like Maine's yellow flag law. And that could result in their being temporarily separated from their weapons while they're getting mental health treatment. And I think this is very important. There were so many missed opportunities in this horrific mass shooting to have stopped Robert Card.
You know, and I think the stigma around mental health and mental health treatment is a big part of the problem, both in mainstream society and certainly in the military. So then how do we work to address that and remove that barrier?
That's a great question. And as a society, we've got to start treating mental illness the same way we would treat a physical illness. We have put far more money into mental health services for our veterans and for our active duty service members in recent years, and I've supported those efforts wholeheartedly.
And just any further word from the Army Reserve or the Army Inspector General as to a potential completion date or release date for those reports that you were referencing?
Well, that's an issue that I pushed them hard on because they're way overdue. Originally, the Army Reserve report was supposed to be completed by the end of January. The Secretary of the Army told me it's going to be a few more weeks, but I do expect that we'll have it probably by the end of June.
And then you'll have to, of course, review both of those reports so that they can inform your legislation.
That's right.
Okay. Another important topic that we've seen quite a bit of recently, we've seen really an explosion of these large-scale illegal marijuana growing operations. We've reported on them, I feel like, constantly for the last few months at least. They're run by largely foreign actors, and I know that you've questioned FBI Director Christopher Wray and Attorney General Merrick Garland on this very topic. So what is being done at the federal level, or what could or should be done to address this threat to our state and these bad actors?
The federal government is now involved in assisting county, state, and local law enforcement in closing down these illegal marijuana growing operations that have taken over homes in rural Maine. And by the way, they're ruining those homes. They will never be suitable for people to live in again, which worsens our housing crisis. But even more important, the marijuana that's being grown poses both a public health threat and a national security concern. So I believe that the federal government has been a bit slow in getting involved, but they are fully involved now. It's not only the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Maine, but the Drug Enforcement Administration, the FBI, the IRS. There's a concerted effort to support the really extraordinary work that's being done by our sheriffs in particular. And in Somerset County, the sheriff's office has closed down many of these illegal growing operations, but many other sheriffs and local and state law enforcement have been involved as well. One of my grave concerns, and this is I've brought up even to the Secretary of State, is it appears that a lot of these growing operations are linked to the Chinese cartels. And we don't know whether it's money laundering that's then used to bring fentanyl into the country. We don't know whether all of the marijuana that's produced meets the standards of Maine. We suspect that it does not.
Right.
And it's being shipped out of state or sold on the black market. But this is really serious. There are an estimated between 100 and 200 of these operations in Maine. So it's going to take all hands on deck to close them down. And I'm pressing at the federal level on why are the Chinese doing this?
You know, it seems to me it's a multi-pronged national security threat.
It is.
Yeah. When you think about that number, 100 to 200 of these sites in the state of Maine, I mean, what goes through your mind? That's daunting.
I was stunned,
Yeah.
I have to say. And what these criminals are doing is they're buying up homes in isolated areas in the hopes that they won't be located. But you've only to look at their electricity use to realize that something is going on in those homes, because they use way, way more than the average electricity amount. And I also worry for the people who are working in those homes. It's hard for me not to believe that it isn't forced labor of some type, because they're being exposed to black mold, to all sorts of unhealthy conditions. So you have to wonder. I know the U.S. Attorney says that there's no evidence yet of human trafficking, but there has been evidence in other states.
Okay, so definitely something that we're going to watch very, very closely.
Absolutely.
Okay. Another issue facing rural Maine, and this is another kind of quality of life issue for sure. Broadband access and connectivity are already major challenges in various parts of the state of Maine, and now we know that the Affordable Connectivity Program is ending, so that's going to throw up another barrier for people. Is there any chance of this program surviving or something coming up to take its place? What's the status there?
There is a chance of the affordability program being continued. When we drafted the infrastructure bill, Senator Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire and I were in charge of the broadband section, and we were able to put $65 billion. It was a huge investment to focus first on unserved communities like some of our islands, and then underserved communities. But if people can't afford the service, then having the wire strung or the satellite access doesn't really help them. Right. So that's why we directed this program to be included, as well as funding to buy the initial device if needed. Okay. And what I think is going to end up happening is the device money probably will be struck. We will ask the companies to subsidize the program, because after all, they've gotten billions of dollars to extend their systems so that they can get more customers, and that helps them as well as the families of rural Maine. And I also believe that probably there'll be a change in the income level for qualifying. That will help save money and put it on a more sustainable path forward.
All right, I want to make sure we get this last question in. We were told that recently you were given the designation of most bipartisan senator. So that would be a highly notable distinction, regardless of context. But when we look at how incredibly polarized Congress is and the division and fighting that's going on, it seems it's even more important, right now. How have you managed to work in a consistently bipartisan manner in an environment that isn't always bipartisan?
It's rarely bipartisan these days, but I've worked very hard with like-minded colleagues on the other side of the aisle. On the Appropriations Committee, for example, we were able to report 7 of our 12 appropriations bills out of committee unanimously last year. And it was the first time in 5 years that they had been reported on time, not to mention unanimously for 7 out of the 12. 2 others had only 1 dissenting vote. It takes a lot of work, and a lot of it comes down to personal relationships and finding people who are pragmatic, common sense in their orientation, and want to get things done. They're not just interested in going on social media and using disputes to raise money. They want to get things done. And fortunately, there's still a core on both sides. But I am very proud of that designation. I've had it in 9 of the past 13 years, and it's something that I think reflects the approach I take to the job of a very main-oriented approach of getting things done.
Well, we thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule as you do your work to come here and talk with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Did that time out okay? Yeah. Awesome. All right.